Hey everyone, Ryan here at E-Trailer. Today on our 2017 Winnebago Travato camper van, we're going to be showing you how to install the Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we do that, why don't we take a minute, we'll check these out and make sure they're going to be the right setup for you. When it comes to the ProMaster chassis, people use them to do a lot of different things. You know, you got these motorhomes, real popular, and work vans, you know, and stuff like that. And so they take on a lot of weight, all these accessories and air conditioners, so on and so forth. Or if it's a work van, you got all your equipment back here. And, you know, when everything's weighted down, that leaves a lot of room for improvement as far as the suspension goes, handling, so on and so forth. And we kind of have a unique situation today. Our neighbor actually already has a suspension improvement. It's a SumoSpring-type enhancement. And as far as the squat and everything goes, it's really not that bad. But with that said, they're just looking for more adjustability, and that's what the air springs should provide. So I'm really curious to see how the air springs are going to compare up against this type of enhancement that's on there already. So one way to find that out, and that's take it for a spin. So let's go ahead and get that done. First thing that we're going to do is go over some bumps and see how this is going to hold up here. And I like to get going over a couple of them, kind of get some movement going in the chassis and everything. And honestly, the way this is set up now, the suspension don't really feel too bad, to be honest. But one thing that I am noticing is sway. You know, it's kind of sloppy. So we hit a bump and it's going like this. Definitely not terrible. I mean, it kind of is what it is, right? I don't think there's going to be anything that'll fix it completely. So I'm really curious to see if these air springs are going to help out with that and you know, help eliminate it a little bit more than what's on there right now. What I'm going to do now, we don't have a ton of room to work with here, but I'm going to go in a big circle and try to really get, you know, this weight transferring and try to get this thing to lean as much as possible. That way we can kind of compare, you know, to our air springs. And usually that's where I notice the biggest difference with air springs. And I wish I just had a little more room, be able to go a little faster. Cut it pretty hard here, and honestly, from just doing this, it's really not too bad. So we'll see what happens. You know, if we put the air springs on, will it be better? Will it be worse? And so on and so forth. But the one nice thing with these air springs is if you do happen to ever change your load or anything like that, you're able to adjust them and really kind of fine tune and dial everything in. So yeah, we have a good starting point to work from and kind of go from there. We got our airbags installed now, and I got about 50 pounds of air in them, and I feel like that'll be about spot on. It actually put a little rake in the back of the vehicle here, and if come to find out that's too much pressure, it's a little too rough, not a big deal. You can always let some air out or vice versa. But we're gonna hit a couple of bumps now. Being later in the day now, so a lot of people decided to park on our course here, so we're making do, but not a big deal. We really only need one or two to kind of feel out what's going on anyway. And after just hitting that one, it felt better. I will say that. I think it's an improvement over the SumoSpring so far. But we'll go ahead and get on this one here. And I'd probably say the main difference, just from hitting those couple, that this airbag has over the Sumo is the responsiveness and how the suspension kind of recovered. With that Sumo, it did a good job of kind of absorbing everything right. It was smooth and everything else like that, but you know, you could feel it come down a little bit further, up a little bit further. It took a little bit longer. As to where the air spring, it kind of took it better. You know, you hit it, you felt the suspension come down a little bit, but then rebounded pretty much immediately. So as far as, you know, hitting a pothole or a bump or something like that goes, I'd say the air springs, of course, depending on the pressure you have set in there and everything else, probably has a slight advantage over that Sumo. And especially if you don't have a Sumo or nothing, it's just a factory style Jounce bumper, it'll be night and day difference, because those Jounce bumpers, the factory ones, they don't provide any support at all. So you would really notice a huge improvement there, as far as that would go. So like I said, kind of interesting. We're starting from an upgrade already and changing to this air spring. But we'll go ahead and do our circles now. Try to get this thing leaning. And like I said, this is usually where you notice a big difference, and definitely, even over that Sumo spring, I essentially feel hardly any body roll at all. Some still there, don't get me wrong, but I'm able to kind of pick up more speed than I was earlier, more comfortably, and that's a good thing, you know. Really, with these suspension enhancements across the board, I feel like this is going to be the most important scenario to improve upon, because you're always going to be turning. These vehicles like this are just so top heavy, and so having additional support there, regardless of the enhancement, is a no-brainer. You know, it's going to improve your driving experience and you know, give you more confidence when you're going down the road. Here's how the airbag looks like once it's installed on your vehicle, and pretty simple concept. You know, it's going to replace that factory Jounce bumper, or in our case, the SumoSpring-type enhancement. And the nice thing with these airbags is that they're adjustable. You know, you got 5 all the way up to 100 PSI, which is convenient, especially on a vehicle like our camper van here. You know, let's say maybe if you're on the lighter side, you might only need 30, 40 pounds air in these things, but maybe you want to pull a trailer around with you, or you know, your water tanks are completely full, or whatever the case may be. You know, you can always put more air pressure in it to really fine-tune your ride and make it as comfortable as possible. The airbags are going to have a load carrying capacity of up to 5,000 pounds. Now, that's not going to increase what your vehicle can haul or carry. That's just what these are rated for. So something to think about there. And one of the things with airbags is a little bit of maintenance is going to be involved, right? So these are going to require at least 5 PSI in them at all times. That way you don't jeopardize the integrity of the bag or anything along those lines. So if you end up running lower pressures the majority of time, and maybe you get a real cold night or something, it's just, you want to check it and make sure it never goes below 5. And that's kind of where the other style enhancements like the SumoSpring or this Timbren, for example, kind of have a benefit there. You know, you put something like this on and that's it, but you don't get that adjustability. So something you have to kind of figure out what you want to do. Now, to make that easier and to make adjusting the air springs easier, you can always pick up an air compressor kit. I really like the Airlift wireless ones. They are really responsive, great communication, and it lets you, adjust pressures on the fly. You can set up the controller to have presets. So one could be for that maintenance. So when you turn the key, it'll always make sure that the pressure is correct, and just kind of simplify things a little bit for you. I held up this Timbren a minute ago and figured I'd touch base on it. So very similar to how SumoSpring works, but I find with these Timbrens that they're a little more aggressive or firm, when it comes to supporting the vehicle. If you'd rather have one of these over an air spring, you just don't want to have to deal with an airbag. I feel like it'd be situational, given the fact that this vehicle had Sumos on it before, and being able to drive it around, I think they did pretty good, and were pretty forgiving and whatnot. But for those of you that might have one of these as a converted, a big work van or something, a Timbren might be better suited for that. Generally speaking, you just won't get as as comfortable as a ride with the Timberin over some of the other ones. That's just from my experience though. There is another airlift kit available for these vehicles, and they look extremely similar, so you might be wondering what's the difference, right? And really the main difference between the kits is one of them, like the one that we have installed, is going to have an internal jounce bumper. So imagine the factory type jounce bumper, all right, something similar to that, actually inside of the air spring, as opposed to the other kit, like this one, that does not have a jounce bumper inside. So you can smash a bag all the way down. And really, what that internal bumper is going to do is be a fail-safe, more or less. So if the bag were to get below pressure or overloaded or something along those lines, you know, you'll still have a jounce bumper there to help not only protect the bag, but prevent your suspension from bottoming out as well. You know, that's unlikely that a situation like that would happen, so it's totally your call, but it's definitely recommended. These are what I usually like to recommend, especially on a setup like this. How you would inflate the bags: you have 2 manual inflation valves, and one goes to the right side, the other one goes to the left side, so you can adjust them independently, which I like on our vehicle. And I say it because we have a big tank, water tank, on the right side. So if you have a load like that, or whatever the case may be, you know, you could always put a little more pressure in this side to compensate for that. If you'd rather not deal with that and you just want the same pressures in, you could always pick up a T like this and connect them together, and you'd have one fitting. So let's say if you put 30 pounds air in the fitting, it'd go 30 pounds to both bags. So that's always an option for you. How I have these mounted, I just use this little bracket that zip ties to the hitch. You will have to pick this up separately if you want to set it up like this, but there's a lot of different ways you can mount up the fittings and do a lot of different cool stuff with, but that's entirely up to you. But other than that, at the end of the day, you know, air springs are an extremely popular upgrade. I see why a lot of people like them. Having that adjustability, being able to set everything up exactly how you want it, and they work, you know, they flat out work. You know, denying that. But as far as the installation goes, these really aren't too bad. You know, not a whole lot involved when it comes to airbags. So one of the easier kits, at least from my experience. So you shouldn't really run into too many issues or take up a bunch of your time. Now, if this is something that you don't want to mess with, don't have the place to do it, whatever the case may be, you can always use our dealer locator network, and that can help you find a shop in your neighborhood that can help you set something like this up. But if you're going to do this yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here at the back of our vehicle, and we need to lift it in a manner to where the suspension is going to be unloaded, meaning the frame and the axle, we're looking to get that maximum distance in between there. So for those of you at home, you can use a jack and jack stands, use all the safety precautions, and you'd want to lift the vehicle up by the frame to achieve that. And honestly, you don't even really need to get the wheels completely up off the ground. If they're just barely touching, that's usually enough. Since I'm on a drive-on type lift, what I did was just use a couple of pull jacks to lift it up by the frame to accomplish that. This is the area of where you want that distance to be increased, and that's going to give us some maximum room to work when we go to install our air spring and everything. But with that said, we need to remove what's already there. So in our case, we have a SumoSpring. A lot of you at home are probably going to have the factory style jounce bumper, which really the SumoSpring is kind of just a big version of that. So the concept is going to remain the same, but these just thread on, right? I'm going to use an oil filter wrench actually, but you can use a spanner wrench, or take a hammer and a chisel or something like that to give you that leverage you need to spin this. So I'll just work this thing until we can completely remove it. with the Sumo Spring, or if you have your regular jounce bumper, we're not going to be reinstalling them. Since we are going to be using this well nut that's in the frame, it is a good idea to clean out the threads. You can spray penetrating oil or something in there and take a toothbrush just to get any potential corrosion or debris out from the threads. You can grab your upper bracket now, and this is going to get bolted up to the bottom of our frame, you know, using that hole that we just cleaned out. But with that said, there's also 2 more slotted holes here, and I like to do this first. You can put your hardware in these slotted holes, and that's going to consist of this bolt, a split lock washer, and a flat washer, like that. So one thing that I like to do is take that hardware combination. You'll need two of them, right? And I like to tape the washers to the head of the bolt. I just got a little packing tape here. Make sure the tape's not going to be on the threads. That way they all stay together. And you'll kind of see why I'm doing this a little bit later on here. It's just going to make it easier for a future step. So I'm just going to drop those right on in like that. And then the bolt that we're going to be using up through here is this bolt, and you'll put on a split lock washer and a flat washer. If you take an extension and a 17mm socket and drop the head of the bolt into it, it makes it a little bit easier. But I'm going to feed this up through the bracket, and then we'll go ahead and get this started. And we're trying to make sure that this is going to be, parallel with the frame. So I usually get it pretty close here. And then I'll just snug it down a little bit to keep it into position. And once you're happy with it, you can grab a torque wrench and tighten down the bolt to the specification and the instructions. And any bolt that we're going to tighten, there will be a spec listed for it. Start to assemble our air spring now, and on the top of the air spring, there's going to be 3 threaded holes there, and the one that goes all the way through, this one, we can take the 90-degree fitting. We'll thread this in. So get it as tight as you can by hand, and then come back with a 1/2-inch wrench and tighten it about another 1.5 turns. And what I like to do now is put a little bit of air in the bag. That way we can check if it's leaking. It's just a lot easier to see and fix, off of our vehicle first. If you grab your air line, it's going to be one big piece, and so you are going to have to cut it about in half, which I've done. Usually, depending on how you route your lines and everything, usually the passenger side of the vehicle end up needing a little bit more length, so keep that in mind. And whenever you cut airline, you want to use a tool like this, or you can take a utility knife and a block of wood. You just want to avoid using a regular pair of snips because it'll probably kind of kink the line up and potentially leak. So you want a good, clean, straight cut. Something like that, no burrs or anything. And just going to plug right into that fitting there. And I'm just going to put a little bit of air in it. And check it for any potential leaks. Like I said, I like to do it like this because once it's on the car, it's just so hard to see. But I have some soapy water here. And really, with this one, we're just primarily focusing on this area, right? But this is how you can check for leaks once everything's back together too. And what you're looking for is for bubbles to continuously and rapidly form. If you see that, you know you got a leak, right? In our case, everything looks good. I don't see it leaking, hear it leaking. If it was, you could come back with your wrench and snug it up a little bit more until you fix it. But with that said too, just while we're right here, let's say if everything's all together and you have a leak right here where the line plugs into the fitting, what you would do is let all the air out of the system. And the way you can disconnect these, just kind of push on that collar and pull the line out. So if that was leaking, once it's all together, you'd come back, you know, recut the line, make sure it looks good, plug it in and check it again. So I'll leave that disconnected until we have everything installed. But as far as our connection point there, we're in good shape. What we can do now, grab one of your roll plates, and that is going to go over the top of the air spring like that. And then we're going to flip this over. Remember what side the fitting is on though. So fitting is closest to me. You can grab another roll plate, set that on, and then you can grab your lower bracket. And with the lower bracket, one side has this flange here. You want this flange side to be on the same side as the air fitting is on the airbag. So it'll sit on here like that. And then for this hardware, you can take one of these bolts, split lock washer and a flat washer. We'll get both of these started. Run them down by hand. Take a 9/16, we'll snug them up a little bit. And then I'll make sure to come back with your torque wrench and get them completely tight. Something that I like to do is secure this roll plate to the bottom one. And that's because if you remember those two bolts that we put in our upper bracket, those are going to have to line up with these holes in the top of the bag, and you can't really see all that great. And so a lot of times it can happen that roll plate can shift a little bit, and then you're trying to line it up, and kind of just a pain. So in the roll plates there's little drain holes, and I just take a zip tie and run them through. Make sure they're lined up and everything. And tighten them down like that. And that keeps that roll plate in position much better. And it's not a huge deal afterwards because you just come back and cut off the zip ties, you know. And then something else you can do to give you a visual as well is take a marker and put a mark from the roll plate down to the bag, and that just kind of gives you something to go off of as well. Back underneath the vehicle, I did forget about this little piece. It's this little metal retainer, and it's just snapped into place, helping to keep this e-brake cable in line. And you can just pry that off. We're not going to be reusing it because our lower bracket will sit pretty much on top of this and hold it, kind of do the same thing. So get that out of the way. And then our air spring assembly. Let's get a set on there like this. And then you can grab those bolts, line everything up, and we'll get them started hand tight. Once this is secured, you just want to leave the hardware hand tight. That way you can still kind of maneuver the bag. But you know, once you're sure it's started and everything, we'll come back and the zip ties off. Just be careful not to nick the bag or anything. All these out of the way, and it seems to make everything so much easier. Just kind of, you have one big piece trying to line up instead of, you know, 5 different parts moving around on you while you're doing this. But what we're looking for here is our bracket to be nice and level with our leaf spring. And you can take a U-bolt, so you'll have one on the back of the bracket, one on the front of the bracket. You'll run it up through there like that, around the leaf spring pack. Then you can take a flat washer, a nylon lock nut, and we'll get all these started hand tight. Once the U-bolts are in place, we can snug them down with a 9/16. And whenever you tighten up a U-bolt, you want to do it evenly on each side. That way it'll draw up nicely. So I'll usually just run it down a few turns. And then once it is snug, we'll grab our torque wrench and get them completely tightened down here. What you can do now, grab a 9/16 box wrench and make sure that the bag is straight as possible. That's why we left those top bolts loose. So I like how it's setting. We'll come back and get it tightened and torqued down. Trying to get a torque wrench in a regular socket in that small opening, you know, is really tricky. So you can always use a couple of different tools like this, a crow's foot or something like this, I call it a dog bone. That'll let you, they're nice and low profile, let you get in there, get onto that bolt and torque it down. So if that's something you run into, these are always something that you can look into. With that one airbag all installed and everything now, you can repeat that same exact process over on the other side of your vehicle. At this point, we can get our air lines routed. And I like to start with kind of the end of it, right, where we want our fittings to be. And this is where I chose on our hitch. I did pick up this bracket separately. It just zip ties around the hitch, gives you a good mounting point. It's pretty convenient. But the instructions do give you a bunch of ideas and show you a bunch of different ways that you can do these. But you can't always grab this from each trailer if you want. But you take the end of your air fitting there, put on one of the nuts, and then a star washer. You'll push that through, and there's a little rubber washer you can put on there. A flat washer, and a nut. And with these, what I like to do is just take a socket. I'm using a 13, you can use a 1/2 inch as well, and just snug them up by hand. You don't really need to come in here with a tool, a ratchet or anything and crank down on these. You just want to get them snug. So what I'll do now, I'll go ahead, get these routed over to our airbags and show you how I did it. Got our airlines routed, and whenever you do this, you want to make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts. Don't put any super sharp bends in it to kink it or anything like that. But both of them run up through here. And then at this point, the passenger side bag kind of splits off. Starts to go to the right. And the kit is going to come with this little thermal sleeve here that gets pushed over the airline. Use that in the spot where the airline's going to be closest to heat. Depends on how everything is set up on your particular vehicle. Usually you'll have an exhaust pipe pretty close back here. Ours is way up front, so I just put this over by where our generator is. Probably going to be the hottest part. But That in mind, it just continues to run along here. We're gonna have it going down. I'm securing it every now and again with zip ties as well. It just loops over and gets plugged into our air spring like we talked about earlier. Back to the driver's side, that airline just runs straight up, along through here, and gets plugged right in. The kit is going to come with a heat shield as well for the exhaust pipe. Now I'm not going to use it in our case because it's so far away from the airbags, but if your exhaust system is relatively close, probably not a bad idea to do it. And the way it would work, you just put little bends in these tabs like this, and they give you some clamps. You put that like that and then clamp it around the exhaust pipe, and that's how you would secure this in place. We can now inflate our air springs between 40 and 60 psi. That way we can check for any leaks or clearance issues, things of that nature. I went ahead, checked our whole system for leaks. We're good to go, all sealed up. You know, take a quick look, make sure the airbags aren't going to interfere with anything, which are not. We're wide open. And with that all done, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs on our 2017 Winnebago Travato Motorhome.